WWW, and I'm here with Vonna Matthews, who is the founder and the CEO. I'm sorry, she's the founder and editor of chief of CEO Mom magazine. Her magazine is amazing. I just want to quickly put it up on the screen before we add her. Hold for 1 second. I want you to. Absolutely amazing. Let's let her join us so we can talk to her about her book, her design, what she's learned as an editor in chief. Hi, Vonna. How you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Oh, good. I'm good. I want to tell everybody this. So, Vonna and I have worked together on some projects for the youth entrepreneurship program that I have. But we actually did an interview the day of the hurricane that hit New Orleans, and we were interviewing, and it was so great. And then everything went out; it just went back. And
Yes.
so we decided to do this again because I think that the people on the BWW page really needs to hear from you. So thank you so much for joining us. Um, we had a little damage done to the house, but we survived the hurricane. But I can tell you, I won't stay home for another hurricane. I just won't. That's the lesson that I learned. So we are part of the Black Writers Workspace, which is a online community of Black writers, of many new and indie writers, and they're here, they're watching, they've got questions for you, and we just want to learn about your publication. I put it up on the screen so that everyone can just see how dynamic it is. But for now, tell us about yourself and your publication.
Well, like you said, my name is Vonna Matthews, and I am the founder and editor-in-chief of CEOMOM magazine. And I started CEOMOM magazine in 2016. So we're coming up on our fifth anniversary this April. So we're really excited about that. And I started it because I, as a working mom, was learning how to navigate motherhood with not only entrepreneurship, but just with pursuing your passions and your dreams outside of motherhood and really defining yourself beyond just being a mother. And so I had started an organization called Bottles, Bibs, and Pumps, and we provided resources for working mothers, and decided that I wanted to continue the conversation and have something that was ongoing, something regular, so that we could talk about all those topics that impact career women, career moms specifically. And that was why I started CEO Mom magazine.
5 years. That's a long time to be putting together a magazine. Tell us how big is your team? What's the size of your team?
Well, my team is very small as far as people that are in-house that work with me on a regular basis, but I have a pretty wide range of contributors and, people who really, help me with whether it's the creative aspect of it or the writing aspect of it. So in the photography, so that team is pretty large, but the in-house team is small.
We can make so much happen with small teams. And I had actually Joyce Dawkins on here last week, who has a new magazine. She rocks it. And we talked about that. And she said, you know what? It was her first publication to come out. And she said, you know what? I did most of the design on my cell phone. And I do a great deal of my work on my cell phone.
Yeah.
It's just amazing how resourceful you can be when you want to do something. And so that is so great to hear that you're coming up on this great milestone, that the publication is doing well. Is it hard copy as well as digital?
It is. It is. For the most part, we focus on the digital, but it is also available in print. Every issue is so.
So in a time where people are getting away from print, how did you pivot because of the fact that so many of us are no longer buying more, print magazines and print newspapers?
Well, as far as pivoting, I really focused on digital from the very beginning. Because when I started, even in 2016, I think prior to that, print was dying even at that point. And people, I think you had newspapers that were closing down. You just had people that weren't buying as much print. And it's also very expensive to print unless you have that huge volume. And so when you're starting a brand new magazine, you don't have that readership yet. And so print just wasn't a good idea from the very beginning. And that's one of the mistakes, just a little side note, that's one of the mistakes that a lot of new magazines make, is trying to come out the gate printing. You don't need to do that. This is a digital world. Focus on the digital. The reason we started to offer it in print is because we do have some readers that prefer to, get it at their homes and just to be able to touch and read the stories. And so we wanted to make sure that it was accessible that way. But for the most part, we focus on the digital, and eventually we will get into stores and everything, but it's not a priority right now because everybody, as you just said, we're all using our phones and our tablets and everything. So
that's excellent. Talk to us about the day-to-day responsibilities of an editor-in-chief. What do you do? Exactly.
It's a lot. So a lot of it is, one of the biggest things we do is really vetting stories and feature requests. We get, hundreds of requests a day from people who are trying to promote their products to people who are trying to promote their clients. We work with a lot of publicists. So that's a lot of what I do, is sifting through potential stories, sifting through potential features. And then once I narrow it down, there's the interviewing, there's the just staying in contact with all of these different staff members. There is a lot of writing, there's a lot of transcribing, there's a lot of design, layouts that you're approving or looking at. So that for the most part is the day-to-day, but I would say the bulk of it is just, the biggest work is putting everything together, gathering all of that information, figuring out what you want for each issue, and then putting it all together.
And how often does the magazine come out?
It comes out 6 times a year. So we have 4 quarterly, and then we have a special edition that we did not do last year because of COVID, but it's called Dallas Power 15. And so we're based in Dallas, so we started here, and we feature 15 powerful women in the city, and then we do our holiday issue. So we do 6 issues a year.
Is magazine publication lucrative? I'm just going to ask all the questions I think people are wondering about.
What was that question again? Could you repeat that one?
Is magazine publication lucrative? I mean, I grew up in a world, I remember in college when I first started my first business, I worked as a copywriter for a Black-owned newspaper. Hester and Edward Young would come to my house. They did not type, they did not use the computer. And I would type all the copy, and they would cut and paste it down on a newsprint and take it to a printer, and it looked just like the Washington Post, I learned a lot about it, and I learned that there's a lot you can, of course, earn in ad placement. Mm-hmm. So I'm not asking you how much you make, but I am asking, is it a lucrative field to go into? Mm-hmm.
It's lucrative, like you said, with the advertising. You do not make the bulk of your money from subscribers or from the readership. Has to translate into advertising. And so that's why you want your circulation to be high, because the higher your circulation is, the more you can charge for ads. So that's where magazines make their money, is those ads. And if you've ever looked at, I would recommend for anyone who's interested in starting a magazine, is start looking at some of the media kits of some of the big name magazines, and you will see how expensive advertising is. It is extremely expensive. So for me, it's been about growing the circulation, growing the readership, so that we can charge even more for ads. But we make our money from advertising.
Absolutely. I wanted to put that out there because there are a lot of people on the page that are interested in starting a magazine, and it is a lot of work. You have to have content. It has to be properly edited. You have to have a sales team or someone who can handle selling those ads, because that's going to bring the money in the door. There are a lot of different pieces to magazine publication. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about just the industry as a whole. I think we both can agree that like most industries, the publication industry has diversity problems. right? I think a lot of that has had a light shined on it because of some of the information that's come out about the fact that, as African American writers, we're not, making the same or even really being competitive with a lot of the deals that we're getting for our books and so on and so forth. So, however, we do acknowledge that small steps have been made towards evening the playing field between the races and between genders. But have you faced any of that discrimination in publishing, and how have you dealt with it?
I don't believe I have, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I am an independent publication. And so I pretty much control every aspect. And even when I look at the people that I work with, the publicists, I get it's such a diverse group of people who reach out to me, who want to work with me. So from that perspective, I haven't, but I think a lot of it has to do with ownership. And, we've heard that theme within the Black community, especially in 2020, is it's all about ownership. And then when it comes to raising capital, when it comes to partnerships, that's when it gets a little trickier. That's when you start having more challenges with discrimination, because as you know, Black women, we're starting businesses at a much higher rate, but we're having a hard time raising capital. So Once we get to that stage, I think that's where it's the most challenging. And then once we're trying to get those bigger name sponsors, that's when it gets a little bit more challenging. But that ownership is huge in helping. It's just one component, but in helping fight, those diversity issues. And I think that's why on this level, I haven't experienced it as much. But I know as I grow, I definitely will.
You just said something that is so important. And I just want to stop here and let people know that you can submit your questions and we will get those answered or your comments. You said something that's very interesting, and that is about ownership. When you have that level of ownership, it's not to say that you won't be impacted by the discriminatory activities that are happening out there. But when you control it, you have such a great deal of control over how much that you're going to endure from those who may discriminate against you. And that is a beautiful thing. And that's what's so important, as a Black business owner, that we keep that in mind, that ownership really is the key. And as writers, of course, there's always these questions about ownership of our work, ownership of our books, ownership of so many different elements of it, especially now that we're getting into so much self-publishing. There's still so many questions around that. So that is great. I'm reading that there are so many new Black editor-in-chiefs of major magazines, like Harper Bazaar just got a first Black editor-in-chief, and Elle Decor just got a first Black editor-in-chief. It bothers me to keep saying first because it's 2020. And we shouldn't have to worry about those things. But it is good to see, though, that we are being recognized for our work. As an editor, speak to all of us, all of the new and independent writers out there about the importance of getting your work edited. Because as self-published authors, many of us decide not to get our work edited. So give us a couple of tips about, the importance of it and what happens when you don't get your work properly edited. What happens to you if you have, poorly, written information in your magazine? I think it's important that we hear this from someone who has that. I love that, editor-in-chief. I love that title. That's the hit. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, it is extremely important. And one of the reasons it's important is because it does impact your credibility. As a writer, as a publisher, it impacts your credibility a lot. And for me, I think sometimes the reason people don't get editors is because they are strong writers. And so they believe, well, I can do this. But what you'll find, and I find this even with the magazine, is once you've read something several times and you've looked at it, you're going to miss something by default because you've seen it so many times that you're missing. And I've had a couple of times where we've already published something, and I'll look back and I'm like, oh my goodness. And sometimes it's very small grammatical errors, but they still impact your credibility. So it is very important to have another set of eyes. And if possible, I know that, it can get expensive, but if possible, if you can have more than one set of eyes other than your own, because no matter how strong of a writer you are going to miss something. Another reason is not just from the grammatical perspective, but also just from having another voice. Because a lot of times when we're writing from our perspectives, we're writing from our experiences and what we know. And it's good to have someone else look at it so that they can give you another perspective, because you are your audience and you are writing for yourself to a certain degree, but you're writing for your tribe. And your tribe is going to be diverse by nature. And so you want to make sure that you are giving perspectives that are not just exclusive to you. When it comes to how to get editors, I would recommend, if you have a very small budget, look at possible interns. There are some incredible students out here that are getting their journalism degrees, and they would love some real life experience. So if money is a concern, start with interns. And you can also go to any websites like Fiverr. I know sometimes it can be a hit or miss, but there are some talented people on that website. And so just kind of vet, look at reviews, and also look at recommendations. If you are a writer, like your organization, your group, you should already have a team of writers. You should have a tribe of writers. And so refer to them and ask them who are you getting to do your editing? How much do they cost? But get an editor, get someone else to look at your work for sure.
Absolutely. I stress that. Get an editor. It is, I do a lot of PR work for companies, and I send everything to my editor. And when she bloodies up my paper and send it back to me, it's a humbling reminder that we're not perfect. It doesn't matter that we've been writing for years and years and years. You find things, things can be said, can be clarified. Structures of sentences need to be clarified. And so, I think there are, and I hope somebody would chime in on this, but I think there are those who may feel like they can't afford the editor, and then there are those who feel like, I'm so good, I don't need an editor. And so we have an editor in chief here to tell you that the editor in chief needs another set of eyes. So it is okay to get an editor, because this is your legacy, especially in a book or even in your magazine. I mean, this is your legacy, and you want to make sure that it's a good legacy. So, we have Barbara Phipps, who's commented a couple of times. She said that your covers are gorgeous, which they are.
Thank
You did
you.
an amazing job with that.
Thank you.
And she also said, absolutely, as an indie author, she made sure to have the dollars for an editor. And that's great, Barbara, because that's exactly what we're talking about, is the importance of having those editors. She also said that having an editor is not just for grammar, but it's for structure and pacing and so much more. And that is very true. So, Vonna, you do so many things, and you and I, work together on some other things. I was a part of your youth entrepreneurship conference that you had in Atlanta. It was a great experience. Like I said, I've probably said a couple of times, I have a youth entrepreneurship program. For those who don't know, I have a web-based program for youth 13 to 19 years old. And we work with the most innovative kids across the country. Actually, we're stretching out beyond the US. I've had it for 5 years, and Vonna was gracious enough to invite me to come out and speak at an event that she hosted at Emory University. So you also have another magazine, which is CEO Kid, when that's how we end up connecting. And that magazine cover, I mean, the cover is just the layout is just absolutely dynamic. She's tackling issues that are important to women, women who are looking for that work-life balance, kids that are looking to explore innovation and entrepreneurship. That's the power of owning and having the say in what you do, is that you can see where those hurdles are and try to fill the gaps. And that's a beautiful thing. You don't have to sit and wait for someone to validate what you're trying to do. you can move it in a different direction. Talk to us a little bit about work-life balance. You are a wife, an entrepreneur, a mother, a publisher. Talk to us about your work-life balance.
First I will say I don't believe that balance is a real thing. So it's not something that I try to achieve at all. But what I have learned is something that has really helped me is the first thing I will say is having grace with yourself and understanding that it is a challenge, and it's a challenge for everybody. So it's not something that is unique to me or unique to you. It is something that all of us have experienced. And sometimes you are going to have some type of rhythm that is smooth, and other times it is going to be chaotic. And I think just having that grace with myself was the first step in me figuring out what works for me. And going into that, for me, I've had to discover what works for me and then hone in on that. I can't try to duplicate what works for another mother or works for another family. I have to figure out what works for my family dynamic and then hone in on that and make whatever adjustments that I need to make. And the third thing that I would say is systems are amazing. Having systems in place that everybody in the family is aware of. Of course, you're going to have to deviate every now and then, but for the most part, everybody knows what's going on. There's open communication, there's systems, and there's independence. And one of the lessons that I've learned, and I had a friend share this with me, is I have an 8-year-old and I have an almost 6-year-old. And one of my friends said to me, you have to teach them how to do as much as they can by themselves. And I'm thinking they need to be teenagers. And she was like, no, these kids are smart. You teach them how to make their own lunches. You teach them how to go get your own snack. And the more I did that, the more pressure that took off of me. So,
yes, speak. Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. That's really good advice. And I'm glad that you approach the work-life question with a level of honesty that I think a lot of us struggle with, which is accepting that you just may not have it.
Yeah.
And it's the truth. I've done a lot of things over the years, and I must admit I've failed at work-life balance in some ways. But I'm learning how to do better. I'm learning how to at least, make sure that I take care of myself. I started taking Zumba classes. I'm the worst in the class, but I love it because it's just my time to be goofy and to just be me. And so that's a good thing. So Vonna, your experiences or your profession is to fix mistakes. That's what you do, right? That's the unofficial title. Talk to us though for your final, just comments to all of us writers about what mistake that you have to fix that helped to change or strengthen you as an editor. Like what was that pivotal moment that you had that tough decision to make, that tough broken thing to repair in your own experience as an editor that helped you to become a better editor?
I love that question. That's a hard question, but I love that question. And I will say a mistake that I had to make was not following my gut and doing things with my magazine that other people wanted me to do. And not all the time, but I did have one situation where I did something that someone outside of my organization wanted me to do, and I had to pay for it. So I would say that learning how to really listen to my gut, not question it. I think that's something that we as women do a lot, unfortunately, is that we unintentionally invalidate our feelings and invalidate what we know. And that's something that I've struggled with. And so paying attention to what my brand is, what my vision is, and not apologizing for that, because I know what I've been given. I know what my ideas are. I am creative, and just being sure about myself and being sure about my vision and not compromising that for anybody. And it's one of those things where, people can't always tell from looking at the final product, but there's a process that you go through. And I've had to learn to hone in on my gut and feel good about it and be unapologetic about it. So that's a huge mistake I had to fix, and I've learned. So So.
Great answer. Great answer. Do you have any questions from anyone out there? I know Barbara has dropped a couple of comments, and we're just so happy to have you here to talk about editing, to celebrate you, and we ask that you just continue to be great because your greatness really shines an amazing light on all of us. I think what has happened from a political perspective lately has really shown us the importance of how one person pushing hard to do well with what they do is so amazingly helpful and such a blessing to all of us. And I think about Stacey Abrams and how she is getting a great deal of love from the community, all communities.
Deservingly so. Yeah.
Right. She pushed. I didn't even know what she was doing. I mean, I don't know if a lot of people do. But she wouldn't stop. And so you have to learn that, you can push hard, fight hard, even in the quiet, in the darkness. Because when it all comes together, like your magazine, when it all comes together, it becomes a blessing to all of us. Because we can look at you and say, Vonna's doing it. You know what I'm saying? She's doing it, and that means I can do it too. So we have a comment from Linda Harris. She said, online blogs are getting sophisticated. Are there blurred lines now with online magazines?
I would say no. Well, if you go to my website, CEOMOMmagazine.com, it has that blog appeal. But I think that the line is not blurred only because, specifically if you do a spread. If you don't do a spread, then yes, that line is going to be very blurred and it's going to be hard for people to distinguish the two. But if you offer, and it doesn't even have to be print, if you offer some type of spread, it distinguishes you and it makes you stand out from online blogs.
Great question, great answer. That is excellent. Any other questions out there? So, Vonna, we will be posting this. Well, right now it's live streamed on Facebook, on our Black Writers Workspace page. We hope that you will join us. It's a private group. We have 2,700 members. We are hosting quarterly book fairs, and we have one coming up January the 29th, where we have Doris Payne, who is the international jewel thief. She's in her 90s now, and they're about to do, she has a book, Diamond Doors, but I think Diamond Doors is either the book or the movie that's about to come out. So she's going to be there. Tracy Sherrod, who is the editor-in-chief for Amistad. And we have a host of other speakers. So it's all live streamed. It's free. We invite you to come out, be a part of it. We will also have a host of exhibitors who are all selling their books. And we want to, encourage more people to do that. We want to learn more about your magazine. We would love to have you as an exhibitor so people can see you. The interactive exhibitor will allow you to talk to people, like go into your own chat room and talk. So you know me, I love to come up with something interesting.
I love it. I love it.
I have to laugh because I'm sorry.
Thank you so much for having me. I've loved it. One of my favorite interviews so far. So thank you so much.
Thank you. We have one more question. I knew I'm pausing because I know how it takes us a little time. So Barbara wants to know, what advice for someone approaching you for ad space? What do you look for? Great question.
I do look for, we do have a contact form that's online, and if you just click on advertising, you can fill that out. And it gives us an idea of your brand as well as your budget. And we do put together packages that accommodate a lot of different budgets. We tell you, what we can do for you. One of the things that we do look for is we just look at, the credibility of your brand as well as the visuals, because we want to make sure that it's a good fit for the publication itself. So those are the main things we look at, just that credibility, the visuals, the brand development, etc., and what your budget is.
Right. And what is your readership for your magazine?
My readership right now, if you look at my media kit, it's around 100,000. So we're in the process of updating that. So that's the readership right now, about 100,000.
That is great. That is great. I want to put this out as a plug too, because I do work with and deal, and communicate and connect with a lot of writers on the page. You guys provide me with your information because we do have a weekly newsletter that goes out. And I do promote several people from the page. I encourage everyone to get professional headshots.
Yeah.
I encourage everyone to get, to do your graphics as professional as possible. I can't say every time everything I do is as clean as it should be, simply because I'm pulling in or using graphics from that people have sent me. But back to what you're saying about ad, this is your brand. And so when you want to put an ad in a newspaper, or a magazine, you definitely want to make sure that you have your best
Yeah.
face forward, meaning that your graphics are high resolution and your headshots are high resolution as well. It can cost you a bit, but it means so much when you can always be able to provide, high res headshots for different, either your publications or just when people ask for your bio. You
Yeah.
want to have.
And you can do a lot with an iPhone.
Mhm.
I've literally had people send me very high res, excellent pictures with their iPhone. So I would recommend, if you don't already have one, get a ring light, get some type of backdrop. If if you're trying to save money, and learn how to do those things yourself. If you don't have the money right now to outsource. So.
That's great. That's great. So Barbara said, thank you. And I want to end with that. Thank you so much for being on the call. I'm so sorry about the hurricane and,
Oh, I'm glad you're
here, but I
I'm
wanted
glad
to
you're
be on here. And so we're just grateful to have you. And like I said, continue to be great. And thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
on the show. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Again, everyone, I just want to thank you all for watching and being a part of the BWW. This has been an amazing experience for me, and we're going to continue to grow, but we also want to continue to offer as many services as possible. So on a weekly basis, we have been highlighting books in our e-newsletter. You can always buy ads in the e-newsletter as well. But if you cannot afford to buy ads, we randomly select books that we highlight, and we will ask you to send us your book synopsis, because we're all about promoting you. And that's what's important. So we have the weekly e-newsletters, we have the once a month roundtable, we have the quarterly book fairs, and there's going to be more to come. And we have the online catalog where you can actually put your book in the catalog. So there's so much that we're trying to do to just promote our authors, and we hope that you will continue to support us. So thank you so much to Vonna. Thank you to Nicole for being on here today. We will be having and hosting these interviews, hopefully weekly, for the next couple of months. And so just look for us to give you a call and ask you to be on our show, because we really want to showcase some of the great writers that are out there. So thank you so much.